The chapter begins with Yunseong, a young man with red hair, standing in a courtroom, angrily cursing at the judges. He's furious about being sentenced to community service, which he feels is unfair. He believes the judges are biased against him because he doesn't have a mother. Yunseong's anger reaches a boiling point, and he throws a chair, causing chaos in the courtroom. Security guards rush in to check on the judge's well-being. An elderly man attempts to calm Yunseong down. The judge, remaining calm and composed, removes his glasses and mentions that this is his first time encountering such behavior in a juvenile case. He sternly tells Yunseong to pick up the chair, but Yunseong responds with defiance, showing the judge his middle finger instead of complying. Now that we have seen Yunseong's behavior is deemed an insult to the South Korean legal system. The court invokes Juvenile Law Number 9 as he shows no willingness to reform, leading to severe consequences. Yunseong arrives at the Yangcheon Detention Center, a facility for underage criminals. As he steps off the bus, Ji-hoon, someone from his past, approaches him. Ji-hoon seems surprised and tries to talk to Yunseong, but the security guard intervenes. Ji-hoon tells Yunseong that they haven't seen each other in a long time and asks why he's there. He also invites Yunseong to meet him at Ward B after roll call before walking away. Next, Lee Gwakyun, a middle-aged correction officer with white hair, approaches Yunseong. Gwakyun asks Yunseong about his relationship with Ji-hoon and warns him that Ji-hoon is a troublemaker involved in blackmail and sexual assault. Yunseong responds with a menacing or mocking expression but remains silent. Gwakyun, seemingly annoyed by Yunseong's demeanor, smacks a stack of papers into Yunseong's head and tells him to look him in the eye. Gwakyun continues to question Yunseong, asking why he caused a scene at the court and if he wanted to end up in the detention center. He also tells Yunseong that they'll be seeing each other often and that Yunseong should behave. Meanwhile, Ji-hoon talks to his friend about Yunseong, calling him a loser and sharing that Yunseong was infamous in middle school. Ji-hoon's friend seems surprised by this information. As Ji-hoon and his friends discussed about Yunseong, Yunseong was simultaneously engaged in a conversation with Gwakyun. However, the atmosphere between Yunseong and Gwakyun was decidedly tense. Yunseong's intimidating demeanor seemed to be unsettling Gwakyun, who was visibly sweating. The power dynamic was unmistakable, with Yunseong exuding an air of dominance. The conversation was shrouded in an almost palpable tension, leaving the reader wondering what was being said and what would unfold next. Then on the next panel, we see Yunseong stands cornered, surrounded by Ji-hoon and his friends, who block his path. Ji-hoon smacks Yunseong's face, laughing maniacally, and says, "It's so nice to see you again." He points at the bruise on Yunseong's forehead, partially hidden by his hair, and says, "Your face again. Did you forget?" Ji-hoon pushes Yunseong's hair aside, revealing the bruise, and continues to taunt him. "Did you feel different because you messed up and ended up in juvenile detention?" He laughs, saying, "Ah, it brings back memories. We had a lot of fun, didn't we?" Ji-hoon reminds Yunseong of the time he tried to kill himself in the school washroom, calling it so dramatic. "Thanks to you, we got charged with school violence," Lee Yunseong. Ji-hoon also brings up the incident where Yunseong was sexually assaulted by him. Ji-hoon says, "You didn't come here because you missed me, right?" Yunseong responds with a moment of silence, closing his eyes and then opening them again. He says, "You are right, Ji-hoon." Suddenly, Yunseong grabs Ji-hoon's ears with both hands and says, "I came here because I missed you." He sticks out his tongue in a mocking manner and kisses Ji-hoon on the lips. On the next panel, we see Gwakyun, a juvenile officer, sits on a sofa, bidding farewell to two women who thank him for covering their shift. As they leave, they whisper to each other, curious about Gwakyun's sudden helpfulness. Meanwhile, Gwakyun seemed dazed, remembering his conversation with Yunseong. Yunseong reminded him of his past actions, which had serious consequences. The old guy had interacted with someone underage using a misleading approach. Yunseong shared more details, including the location and circumstances. The old guy became agitated and fearful, asking Yunseong who he was and why he was at the juvenile center. Yunseong looked at him intensely and replied that he is looking for someone and also inquiring about a couple of juveniles. Then the scenes suddenly shift to the moment when Yunsung is engaged in a fierce and intense fight with Ji-hoon, his eyes blazing with a fierce determination. He bites Ji-hoon's lip, holding his head in place with a firm grip, while simultaneously kneeing him brutally in the face and chest. Ji-hoon's eyes widen in shock and pain as Yunsung's knee connects with his face, the sound of the impact echoing through the air. Just as Yunsung gains the upper hand in the fight, one of Ji-hoon's friends tries to intervene, attempting to pull Yunsung off Ji-hoon. But Yunsung is too quick, swiftly wrapping his leg around the friend's neck. As he tightens his hold, a flashback suddenly plays out in his mind. The moment in the courtroom when he defiantly gave the judges the middle finger. The elderly man who had stood by his side had urged him to apologize, but Yunsung refused, his expression unyielding. That act of defiance had landed him in juvenile detention. The memory fades, and Yunsung's focus snaps back to the present. With a swift motion, he throws Ji-hoon's friend to the ground. The friend crashes down hard, dazed and disoriented. As the fight continues, some of Ji-hoon's friends quickly retreat to call the juvenile officer, hoping to put an end to the brawl. As Yunsung's gaze follows the fleeing friend, he momentarily leaves himself open to Ji-hoon's counterattack. Ji-hoon seizes the opportunity, swinging a wooden stick in a wide arc, aiming for the back of Yunsung's head. However, Yunsung is incredibly quick. With lightning-fast reflexes, he blocks the attack, his hand shooting up to deflect the blow. Ji-hoon's eyes widen in shock at Yunsung's effortless defense. Undeterred, Ji-hoon launches a flurry of wild attacks, swinging the stick with all his might. But Yunsung is a master of evasion, blocking each strike with precision and ease. Ji-hoon's frustration grows with each failed attempt, his face reddening with anger. "Did you train somewhere?" Ji-hoon snarls, panting heavily as he tries to land a hit. Yunsung remains silent, his focus solely on defending against Ji-hoon's attacks. Then, in a sudden burst of offense, Yunsung lands multiple clean blows to Ji-hoon's face, each one precise and powerful. Ji-hoon stumbles backward, his eyes streaming with tears from the pain. But Yunsung isn't finished yet. With a swift motion, he catches Ji-hoon's leg and locks it into a position that makes Ji-hoon's eyes widen in terror. Ji-hoon screams in agony, his legs flailing wildly as Yunsung applies pressure to the lock. While in that position, Yunsung retorted, "You think I'd train for you guys?" He increased the pressure on Ji-hoon's leg, causing a loud cracking sound as the bones snapped. Ji-hoon screamed in agony, hurling curses at Yunsung. "How can you use this technique on a real person?" Ji-hoon gasped, shocked by Yunsung's ferocity. Yunsung grasped Ji-hoon's other leg, ready to inflict the same brutal technique. Ji-hoon begged him to stop, pleading that he would be crippled for life if Yunsung continued. He apologized profusely for bullying Yunsung and causing misery for him and his family. In a flashback, a mysterious guy asked Yunsung why he wanted to learn how to fight. Yunsung replied that he sought revenge because he believed justice wasn't served in this country due to its flawed laws. The mysterious guy asked who he wanted revenge against, and Yunsung said it was someone he knew. Suddenly, the scene cut back to the present, and Ji-hoon's legs snapped with a loud cracking sound. Meanwhile, a juvenile officer arrived on the scene. As we move on to the next chapter, we are reminded that according to available data, assault is the most prevalent form of juvenile crime, with approximately 21,948 reported cases. Additionally, current statistics indicate that destruction of property is the most common type of crime committed by juvenile offenders, with around 956 reported cases. Regarding the underlying causes of juvenile crime, research suggests that a complex interplay of factors contributes to these behaviors. Notably, coincidence and curiosity are cited as the primary factors in 38% of cases. As we delve into this chapter, we will explore these issues in greater depth. Then the scene shifts to the moment where we see Yunsung is holding on to Ji-hoon's leg, refusing to let go, as Ji-hoon screams in agony and foams at the mouth. Ji-hoon apologizes to Yunsung, taking responsibility for the situation. Juvenile Officer Gwakyun intervenes, yelling at Yunsung to release Ji-hoon. Yunsung slowly lets go and approaches Gwakyun with a mocking tone, offering to share a fun story. He whispers to Gwakyun that he had previously mentioned seeking revenge, but reveals that Ji-hoon isn't the target. Yunseong implies that the person he's after is even more unstable and curious, hinting at a darker history between them. Meanwhile, Jihoon lies on the ground, his friends gathered around him, his legs broken and battered. Suddenly, the scenes shift to a different moment. Two guys were chatting when one of them casually mentioned that Jihoon's ankle had been broken. The surprising culprit behind the injury was none other than Lee Yunseong, who was described as totally crazy. The person who mentioned Yunseong's name seemed taken aback, as if they couldn't believe he was responsible for the harm. As they continued talking, the scene seamlessly transitioned to a different setting, where a muscular figure, Park Sang-chol, was in the midst of an intense workout. His arms were adorned with tattoos, and he was holding two people, one in each hand, as he squatted with ease. Sang-chol's focus was interrupted when he overheard the name Lee Yunseong, and his expression shifted from concentration to astonishment. It turned out that Sang-chol, an 18-year-old former medalist in amateur kickboxing, was the person being discussed. He was known for his insatiable curiosity and seemed to be the individual that Yunseong was talking to Gwakyun about. Then, on to the next panel. We're getting a glimpse into the past of Park Sang-chol, one of the bullies who torments our main character. In this flashback, we see a young Sang-chol watching a video with his friend, which shows the famous Mentos and Cola experiment. He looks curious and tells his friend he wants to try it out later. Then the scene shifts to the moment when Park Sang-chol's curiosity is on full display when he suddenly asks his friend if they can tell the difference between pee and a drink by taste. The scene abruptly shifts to Park Sang-chol placing two cups in front of Yunseong, the main character, and asking if he can really not tell the difference. This behavior showcases Park Sang-chol's unconventional curiosity, which is far from normal. He is curious about everything, like someone suffering from thirst. He also asks Yunseong about the effects of taking a laxative and an anti-diarrheal pill simultaneously, demonstrating his need for someone to share his curiosity with. Park Sang-chol watches a video on his phone about the effects of consuming these pills, which warns that it can stop intestinal movement, and he excitedly shares this with Yunseong. Unfortunately, Yunseong is the one who often gets dragged into Park Sang-chol's experiments. Later, Park Sang-chol excitedly tells Yunseong that the experiment really worked and the intestine stopped moving, finding it fascinating. The scene begins with Yunseong, the main character, carrying bags and walking home with Park Sang-chol and his friends. Park Sang-chol suddenly approaches Yunseong and asks if he's alone at home, which Yunseong tries to avoid answering. Park Sang-chol reveals that he knows Yunseong's mother, older sister, and grandmother are all out, and then he and his friends barge into Yunseong's house. Inside, Park Sang-chol's friends start causing chaos, asking for ramen and the TV password, and rummaging through Yunseong's belongings. Yunseong tries to warn them not to break anything, but they ignore him. One of them even starts searching for hidden money in a vase. Park Sang-chol approaches Yunseong, touching his forehead and asking if he's all right, offering him cold medicine. Yunseong takes the medicine, unaware of its effects. After taking the cold medicine offered by Park Sang-chol, Yunseong immediately becomes disoriented and hallucinates. He sees Park Sang-chol and his friends in a distorted comedic way, with Park Sang-chol sporting horns and flowers on his neck. As Yunseong's hallucination continues, Park Sang-chol hands him a towel, from which something falls onto Yunseong's face. Yunseong then sees a microwave in a peculiar position, which leaves him impressed and uttering, "Wow, it's really." However, his hallucination takes a dramatic turn when an explosion occurs, causing Yunseong to lose consciousness. Despite being unconscious, Yunseong can still hear the medical staff discussing his vital signs, noting that his breathing is rapid and his pulse is dropping. When he finally regains consciousness, he finds himself in a hospital bed, wearing an oxygen mask, and sees two men standing over him. Then, the two men suddenly introduce themselves as they were from Seodong Police Station, and Muns, and then start asking questions. But Yunseong's mind was foggy, still reeling from the effects of the substances given to him by bullies, which had left him high and disoriented. He struggled to recall the events leading up to his hospitalization, his thoughts hazy and fragmented. He couldn't remember what the police were asking about, something about a towel and a microwave. His body was racked with pain, and the memory of his house burning down was a distant blur. The scar on his face throbbed, a harsh reminder of the incident. In the next scene we see, Yunseong walks down the road with a blank expression when Park Sang-chul and his friend block his path. They mock him about the recent incident, exaggerating its severity and making fun of Yunseong's attempt to put out the flames with a book. Park Sang-chul claims he saved Yunseong by dragging him to the first floor and demands gratitude, saying, "Don't you agree that you should be thankful?" Yunseong remains unresponsive, his expression unchanged. Park Sang-chul takes a step closer, his tone menacing, and asks, "What's with your face? I told you I saved you, right? Aren't you grateful?" Yunseong thinks to himself, unsure how to respond. Park Sang-chul continues, his voice intimidating, "Are you an asshole who doesn't know how to be grateful?" Yunseong wonders if he should thank Park Sang-chul, feeling a sense of hopelessness wash over him. He reflects on the fear and powerlessness that comes with being bullied, and how it's often hardest when you can't communicate with your tormentor. The scene returns to Park Sang-chul looming over Yunseong, his face twisted in a menacing scowl. Yunseong finally responds, his voice barely above a whisper, "Thank you." The words are laced with fear and submission. Then, the moments when Yunseong returns home to find his mom and grandma in tears, embracing each other. His mom reveals that they received a call from the police station asking if Yunseong confessed to setting a house on fire. Yunseong denies it, but his mom starts yelling, saying that his friends accused him of doing it. The scene shifts to a police interrogation, where one of Yunseong's bullies claims that Yunseong was responsible and mentions that he heard Yunseong took some pills. Another student, a girl, also testifies against Yunseong. Next, Park Sang-chul tells the police that he saw Yunseong set the house on fire and smirk, saying that as juveniles, they won't face punishment. The scene cuts back to Yunseong's mom, who's frantic and worried. She tells Yunseong that he's only 13, and they can't even claim the fire insurance. She's concerned about the consequences, including potential lawsuits and compensation for neighbor damages. She scolds Yunseong, shaking his shoulders, and says that their situation is dire. Later, the scene shifts to the present time, where we see Yunseong walking with Gwakyun, a juvenile officer and warden, while carrying his belongings. As they walk, Gwakyun looks back, his expression hinting at a mix of unease and caution. Then we see Park Sang-chul inside the cell room, wondering who's coming in as the door opens. Yunseong and the warden enter, and the warden addresses the inmates, asking them to pay attention. Due to a recent incident, the warden explains that they've had to temporarily change Yunseong's room. He then introduces the new inmate, Yunseong, and instructs the others to welcome him warmly. The warden also reminds them to kindly help Yunseong if he has any questions. After the announcement, the warden leaves. Then, the moment when Yunseong entered the room, the atmosphere shifted. Some guys murmured in discontent, unhappy about the sudden change. A buzz-cut guy shot Yunseong a venomous glance, making a crude remark that sparked Yunseong's instincts. With lightning-fast reflexes, Yunseong delivered a swift kick to the guy's face, sending him stumbling back in shock. The room erupted into chaos as the other guys charged at Yunseong, their faces twisted in anger. But Yunseong stood firm, taking them down one by one with swift and precise movements. Park Sang-chul watched the mayhem with a menacing glare, his anger simmering just below the surface. Yunseong remained focused, his mind fixed on his reason for coming, to meet Park Sang-chul. In the end, Yunseong stood victorious, having taken down all the guys except Park Sang-chul, who still hadn't approached him. In the next moment, we see Park Sang-chul's eyes widened in astonishment as he pointed at Lee Yunseong, the boy who was once a timid target for bullies. "Lee Yunseong? Really? The same one?" he asked, his tone laced with incredulity. Yunseong set down his belongings, his face a mask of calmness. "There's a way to take down a professional kickboxer with just one finger," he said, his voice flat and even. Park Sang-chul's curiosity was piqued, his quirky personality shining through. "What are you talking about? It's been ages since we last met. But seriously, what's the method?" he pressed, his eyes gleaming with interest. Yunsung's expression shifted, his eyes taking on a menacing glint, yet remaining eerily emotionless. "You still haven't changed, always curious about everything," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. He paused, then nodded. "I will tell you now the method to defeat the pro kickboxer with one finger." The chapter begins with Yunsung getting a tattoo of a person being burned, which appears to be crying. The tattoo artist finishes the work and hands Yunsung a towel to clean up. She asks him about the significance of the tattoo, but Yunsung remains silent with a cold expression. As he's lost in thought, it's revealed that he has other tattoos, including a mermaid, a three-headed dog, and a praying hand with sutra. After a moment of silence, Yunsung reveals that the burning person tattoo represents his grandmother, and he got it because he can't forget about her. The scene then shifts to the present, where Park Sang-chol asks Yunsung about one finger. Yunsung responds enigmatically, leaving Park Sang-chol confused. As Park Sang-chol struggles to understand, Yunsung reaches into the folds of the clothes he's holding and pulls out a hidden can of spray. The spray was concealed within the clothing, and Park Sang-chol didn't notice it until Yunsung revealed it. Yunsung then tells Park Sang-chol that this is the way to control a kickboxer. Suddenly, Yunsung uses the spray to blind Park Sang-chol, who screams in agony as the liquid stings his eyes. Yunsung seizes the opportunity to attack, delivering a swift kick to Park Sang-chol's stomach and then targeting his groin. As Park Sang-chol doubles over in pain and screams at Yunsung, Yunsung wastes no time and lands a series of rapid-fire punches to his face and torso. Park Sang-chol tries to defend himself, but Yunsung's blows are too fast and too precise, as Park Sang-chol is blinded by the spray. Yunsung then steps on Park Sang-chol's feet, pinning him down, and knees him in the stomach with great force. Park Sang-chol is left gasping for air, helpless against Yunsung's relentless assault. During the fight, Yunsung plans to strategically target Park Sang-chol's vulnerabilities. He'll observe Park's defensive moves, and if Park guards his upper body, Yunsung will swiftly attack his lower body. Conversely, if Park focuses on guarding his lower body, Yunsung will seize the opportunity to strike his upper body. By adapting his attack in real time, Yunsung aims to outmaneuver Park and gain the upper hand. Finally, Yoon taunts Park Sang-chol, saying, "I guess that hurt. You look quite good, Sang-chol." In the midst of the fight, Park Sang-chol struggles to open his eyes, affected by the spray. He thinks to himself that if he can buy enough time to open his eyes, then he might have a chance. Also, we can see Park Sang-chol while fighting. He swings his fists wildly, his eyes closed. He swings his fists relentlessly, blindly trying to land a single blow on Yunsung without knowing anything. Just as he swings his punch, Yunsung catches Park Sang-chol's arm with the help of a cloth, like a towel. Sang-chol appears clearly confused or shocked when his hand gets caught, like a towel. Then, Yunsung takes advantage of the situation, locking Sang-chol's arm in a position that prevents him from moving. Suddenly, Yunsung knees Sang-chol in the face and again slams his face into the ground by holding the back of his head and slamming his face around. After slamming Sang-chol's face into the ground, Yunsung says to him, "How does it feel to get beaten with a towel that was just microwaved? Hey, Sang-chol." Then we see Yunsung's mind drifted back to a painful memory from his past. The scene unfolds with Yunsung's grandmother lying in a hospital bed, appearing unconscious and vulnerable as saliva drips from her mouth while she makes a faint, unsettling sound. Eee! A concerned man stands beside her, asking anxiously, "Grandma, are you okay?" Meanwhile, Yunsung's mother is engaged in a heart-wrenching conversation with a doctor. The doctor explains that Yunsung's grandmother's condition is, unfortunately, normal for someone of her advanced age. However, the doctor emphasizes that the traumatic shock of her house burning down has had a profound impact on her mental well-being, far exceeding their initial expectations. Yunsung's mother is visibly emotional, struggling to hold back tears as the doctor continues. The doctor suggests that Yunsung's grandmother may have been putting on a brave face, hiding her true condition from the family. However, her mental state took a turn for the worse when she saw Yunsung's burn marks, a painful reminder of the tragic event. The doctor advises Yunsung's mother to consider sending her mother to a sanatorium, a facility equipped to provide the necessary care and support for her fragile condition. Yunseong's mother is torn apart by this news, her heart heavy with worry for both her mother and her son Yunseong. We then return to the present moment, where Yunseong stands beside Park Sang-chol, who's lying on the ground, slamming his face into the dirt. Suddenly, Park Sang-chol thanks Yunseong, catching him off guard. He continues, saying that thanks to Yunseong, he got to wash his eyes with his own blood. Then, while still lying down, Park Sang-chol kicks his leg upward, aiming for Yunseong's face. Yunseong, caught off guard, tries to defend himself by crossing his arms, but the impact sends him flying backward. Park Sang-chol quickly gets up, looking furious, and asks Yunseong if he wants to die. He also asks about a towel. Then suddenly Park Sang-chol seizes the opportunity, unleashing a swift axe kick at Yunseong, who's still on the ground. "Son of a bitch, did you forget I was a kickboxer?" he yells, his anger and adrenaline fueling his attack. Yunseong scrambles backward, desperately trying to get to his feet while dodging Park Sang-chol's relentless kicks. But Park Sang-chol won't let up, his feet flying in a flurry of motion as he continues to taunt Yunseong. "Did you think I was easy? Did you think you could win against me?" he sneers, his voice dripping with contempt. "The more you struggle, the funnier it gets." Yunseong's eyes dart back and forth, searching for an opening to counterattack, but Park Sang-chol's assault is too intense. He's forced to retreat, his back hitting the wall as he tries to dodge another kick. Trapped, Yunseong looks up to see Park Sang-chol standing over him, his foot planted firmly on the ground, his tall frame looming large. Park Sang-chol gazes down at Yunseong, his eyes flashing with triumph and disdain. Park Sang-chol loomed over Lee Yunseong, who was cornered against a wall with no escape. Sang-chol's eyes gleamed with sadistic pleasure as he taunted Yunseong, his voice dripping with malice. He held his bloodied face with one hand, as if savoring the pain, and sneered at Yunseong. "Hey, Lee Yunseong, this brings back memories, doesn't it?" Sang-chol jeered, his words dripping with venom. "Every time I beat you, you made such a pitiful ringing sound, like a bug scurrying around. It was really cute seeing you wheezing and moaning, you pathetic loser." Sang-chol's laughter sent chills down Yunseong's spine as he took a step closer, his fists clenched. "You crossed the line by using that spray on me," he growled, his voice low and menacing. "Now, I'm gonna beat you worse than ever before. You'll be begging for mercy, but it will be too late." The air was thick with tension as Sang-chol's words hung in the air, leaving Yunseong feeling trapped and helpless. The effects of the spray seemed to be wearing off, leaving Yunseong vulnerable to Sang-chol's wrath. In a flashback, Yunseong is seen talking to a mysterious figure who is revealed to be his fighting teacher. The teacher asks Yunseong where he plans to confront Park Sang-chol, and Yunseong responds that it will be at a juvenile detention center. The teacher seems surprised by this choice, asking if Yunseong really means the detention center, given its restrictive environment. Yunseong confirms his plan. The teacher then offers some strategic advice, suggesting that Yunseong use a spray to blind his opponent and lay down a blanket on the ground. The teacher explains that with some taunting, Park Sang-chol won't even notice his surroundings. Later, we see Yunseong being cornered by Park Sang-chol, but he remains focused. As they face off, it becomes clear that Yunseong has set the scene according to his teacher's plan, with Park Sang-chol standing on the blanket that Yunseong had placed there earlier. In a swift turn of events, Park Sang-chol's attempt to kick Yunseong was foiled when he slipped on a blanket that Yunseong had deliberately placed on the ground. As Park Sang-chol fell, Yunseong seized the opportunity to tackle him to the ground. The scene flashed back to a moment in the past, revealing a painful memory of Yunseong being bullied by Park Sang-chol. Sang-chol, with a sadistic grin, live-streamed the abuse, calling Yunseong Two-Face and falsely accusing him of starting the Donggo district fire. "Hey, Two-Face, look at the camera," Sang-chol said, pointing his mobile camera at Yunseong, who sat silent and frightened. "Everyone, this is the perpetrator of the Donggo district fire," Sang-chol exclaimed, his voice dripping with malice. The livestream's comments section filled with hate. "Isn't he a criminal? Fuck his face! Ha ha! Transfer already!" Sang-chol's friends joined in, physically and verbally abusing Yunseong. One of them asked, "Excuse me, How does it feel to set fires after taking drugs? Another chimed in. Does it feel good? Ha ha ha. Sangchol's friend joined the live stream, commenting, he probably sniffs glue, right? The comments continued to pour in. What a piece of shit, crazy bastard, and shockingly, good job educating him, ha ha ha. As Sangchol's hands touched Yunseong's face, pushing him around, Yunseong's fear was palpable. But when Sangchol hinted at his next cruel move, next up, we have his granny in a coma, all caused by him, Yunseong's expression changed. His eyes flashed with a mix of fear and determination as Sangchol threatened to find his grandmother and broadcast a live show, exploiting her vulnerable state. We'll go find his grandma and give a live show, Sangchol said, his words dripping with sadistic intent. The scene shifts to the present moment as Yunseong tackles Park Sangchol. We can see Park Sangchol is lying on the ground, and we can also see Yunseong is above him, sitting over him. Then, we can see Yunseong suddenly punches Park Sangchol's face multiple times with heavy force, relentlessly. Also, we can see that Park Sangchol is yelling at Yunseong while getting hit in the face, like, Lee Yunseong, this son of a bitch fucker, I'm really gonna fuck you. Then, suddenly we can see Yunseong holding one of Park Sangchol's fingers, left little pinky finger, and suddenly breaking it. Then, also we can see that Park Sangchol is screaming in agony and also yelling at Yunseong like, stop, stop you son of a bitch. Then, while Park Sangchol is screaming, Yunseong doesn't stop and relentlessly continues punching over Park Sangchol's face after breaking his finger. While we can see that Park Sangchol is only trying to cover his face, not to get hit, then, suddenly we can hear Park Sangchol start apologizing to Yunseong like, I am sorry. Then, Yunseong doesn't stop. And then Park Sangchol tells Yunseong again that I am sorry, that he is sorry to Yunseong. Then, suddenly again in the midst of the fight, Yunseong remembers the moment when his grandmother was crawling on the ground away from Park Sangchol's direction. And we can also see Yunseong is standing before Park Sangchol, looking down at the ground in fear. And we can also hear his grandma screaming in agony like, ah! Then again, we can see Yunseong is shaking with fear. Then again, the scene shifts to the present moment, where Yunseong punches over Park Sangchol's face over again and again with great force, again and again, till Park Sangchol somewhat looks like he has lost consciousness, but still tells Yunseong on a shaky tone like, just what did I do so wrong, fuck, you fucker. And also tells Yunseong that we were all young back then, we were all underage, and we all joked and played around. Then we see Yunseong suddenly grip the clippers tightly, his knuckles turning white. With a sudden, forceful motion, he shoved the sharp metal blades into Park Sangchol's mouth. Sangchol let out a muffled cry, his eyes wide with pain and shock. I noticed it all along, Sangchol, Yunseong said, his voice low and laced with anger. Your mouth has always been the problem. He paused, glaring at the man before him. Let's not talk from now on. Without warning, Yunseong's fist connected with Sangchol's face, the clippers still lodged in his mouth. Sangchol's agonized grunts filled the air as Yunseong's memories flooded back. The moment Sangchol had falsely accused him of arson, the devastating impact on Yunseong and his mother. Talking is something only humans do, Yunseong muttered, his hand shaking slightly as he continued to strike Sangchol. But through sheer force of will, he steadied himself, refusing to let the past overwhelm him. He would not tremble, not this time. The assault continued, Yunseong's rage and pain etched into every blow. This was his chance for retribution, to reclaim a measure of control over the trauma he had endured. Though the cycle of violence weighed heavily on him, Yunseong knew he had learned to fight back, to stand up against the injustices he had faced.